Joining us right now is the great Joe diGenova. He's a legal analyst and a former U.S. attorney to the District of Columbia. Joe, good morning, sir.
Good morning, Vince.
Great to have you back with us. I've got Paul Manafort sentencing last week. He got 47 months in prison in his first sentencing. The judge, T.S. Ellis, handed that to him Thursday afternoon related to charges for bank fraud, tax fraud, and other financial crimes. What did you think of the sentence and the actual sentencing by Judge Ellis?
I think the sentence was probably harsh. Too much time. He's been in solitary confinement because of Amy Berman Jackson, the judge in the District of Columbia, who has put him in solitary confinement and, in essence, ruined his health, and it's like a death penalty. The sentence was appropriate. I mean, this guy's he's about to be 70. He's physically a mess. It's fairly obvious from seeing him in the courtroom that his health has deteriorated. This never would have been even investigated had it not been for the conniving inside the Justice Department and the FBI to find a way to get Donald Trump. So as far as I'm concerned, all the weeping and gnashing by the clowns on MSNBC, CNN, and the major networks about they were just appalled at how light the sentence was. Have any of these idiots ever spent a day in a jail or a prison cell? Try solitary confinement for months. What a bunch of fools.
Well, there's something sort of despicable, of course, about praying that someone is given a life sentence for white-collar crimes. It was bizarre, actually.
This sentence was well within the range of crimes committed by people in similar circumstances, but you would never learn that from the commentary. These people are vindictive, and this is what American politics has become.
Now, in Judge Ellis's comments during the sentencing, I don't know if I was misreading it, but it seemed like he was kind of knocking the Mueller team a bit because he went out of his way to say that this had nothing to do with Russia, this case. And again, the recommendation for sentencing was much more extensive by the prosecutors, but he didn't go for those many years. He just gave 47 months.
Well,
was there a brushback here of the Mueller team by Judge Ellis?
Oh, there's no question about it, but he's indicated that from the first time he started handling the case, that he thought that their objective was to get the president by getting Manafort and by making an example of Manafort. Let's remember that from the beginning, the prosecution of Manafort has been run by Andrew Weissman, who was colluding with Bruce Orr and Fusion GPS before he ever got assigned to this case. Remember, Weissman was in charge of the fraud section of the Justice Department. What the hell was Bruce Orr briefing somebody unconnected to counterintelligence law enforcement at the Justice Department? This was a fixed case from day one. There's going to be a reckoning of history with Andrew Weissman and the people in the Mueller prosecution team. That will come in due course. I just think, though, that the treatment of Manafort, no matter what people think of him as a business person and a lobbyist, his treatment by Mueller and everybody associated with him has been despicable. And I think the treatment by Amy Berman Jackson, the judge in D.C., has been equally despicable, totally unnecessary. I have no idea why she has donned a prosecutor's jacket.
Speaking of reckoning, Joe, ABC News' Terry Moran said over the weekend that the media and Democrats are going to face a reckoning if the Mueller probe finds no collusion.
Now, let me play this audio for you. Here is ABC's Terry Moran saying that very thing.
How big a deal is it if they don't find collusion for the president?
Huge. He's cleared if Robert Mueller comes back. Mueller became a folk hero in the United States. Robert De Niro.
Even if he finds all sorts of things.
Sure. No, but the central and most serious question in this investigation, the reason Robert Mueller started it, is did the current president of the United States assist the Kremlin in an attack on our democracy? And if Mueller, after 2 years, comes back and says, I don't have the evidence to support that charge, that's a reckoning. That's a reckoning for progressives and Democrats who hoped that Mueller would essentially erase the 2016 election. It's a reckoning for the media. It's a reckoning around the country if, in fact, after all this time, there was no collusion.
So how do Democrats deal with this? Do they double down in 2020? Do they move the goalposts? If the Mueller report does come out and there's no collusion, what do they do next?
The Democrats do what they always do. They change the subject. And because they are complicit with the media, it will be accepted. There will be no criticism of them. It will be up to the Republicans, usually unarmed and not ready for a battle, to refute that. Trump will do fine by himself. He will get no help from the Republican Party, which has become an irrelevancy in domestic politics when it comes to a good fight. The Democrats will do what they always do. They will lie. They will continue to tell falsehoods. Listen, They all knew from day one that there was no Russian collusion. They had to figure out a way to explain this historic loss by Hillary Clinton in the face of an amateur politician. She got beat because she was lazy, she was physically incapable of campaigning, she had a lousy message, a lousy personality, and a lousy campaign organization. My goodness, I wonder why she lost.
Yeah, it's whatever little satisfaction I got from hearing Terry Moran say there will be a reckoning is tempered by what you just said, which is like, actually, no, there won't. And we saw this happening in 2016, actually, because after the 2016 election, the New York Times, for a hair's breadth of a second, said out loud, we're going to assess how this all happened. We got to really take a look at our coverage, and then nothing changed. I mean, Joe, this keeps on replaying itself over and over.
Yes, well, if you go back and look at the election, the New York Times did its famous Dean Baquet mea culpa. Gee, we have to figure out how we missed this. Then within a matter of days, Hillary starts to sue to have the election set aside, to get electors to switch their votes. She says that we should eliminate the Electoral College. Holder now says we should pack the Supreme Court. Do you notice something here? And then now they're claiming that if Trump loses in 2020, he may not accept the results of the election. Kind of like Hillary, don't you think? She didn't accept the results of the election. What you have here is a pattern of anti-government, anti-democracy actions by the Democrats. But the media doesn't care because they hate Trump. If you hate Trump, you can say anything. That's why AOC is so fascinating, because she is turning the stomachs of traditional Democrats like Biden, who now fear her immensely. What's happening in our politics is truly remarkable. You have a Trotskyite in the form of AOC now running the Democratic Party.
All right, we're going to have more with Joe diGenova here in a moment. You just heard him mention Eric Holder wanting to pack the courts. I want to ask him about that. Also, his latest thoughts on the Mueller report, long expected to show up. We went through the weekend, heard a lot of crickets. We'll find out what our gentleman, Joe diGenova, thinks about all. All right, talking to the great Joe diGenova, legal analyst and former U.S. Attorney to the District of Columbia. Joe, you mentioned this before. Former Obama Attorney General Eric Holder saying in an interview with the Daily Beast, or according to the Daily Beast, that the next Democratic president should seriously consider adding additional seats to the Supreme Court should they be elected alongside a Democratic majority in the Senate. What do you make of the former Attorney General and his comments?
Well, this is classic Democratic Marxism at this point. What they're doing is they're weaponizing government. They can't win at the ballot box in the presidential election. They just had 2 new Supreme Court justices put on by Trump. And so their answer is to pack the court, increase the number of judges to negate the votes of conservatives. This is an anti-democratic, kind of a Marxist, Leninist, Trotskyite answer to a problem that doesn't exist.
Right.
You answer this problem by winning elections and ultimately replacing one of the 9 justices when they retire.
Joe, it seems like there's a whole bunch of these sort of destructive short-term solutions that they come up with. Another example of this is the move to get rid of the Electoral College through this popular vote system, where they think if whoever wins the national popular vote, our state will give them all of our electors. What happens if a Republican wins the popular vote after they create this system?
Look, Vince, they don't like the U.S. Constitution because it works. They don't like the Electoral College. It's in the Constitution. They don't like the Supreme Court. Now, although the number of justices is not named in the U.S. Constitution, and the number can be changed by statute, and FDR did try to do that. You'll notice that the man who was a Democrat, FDR, who not only tried to change the number of justices and pack the court to help himself, he also interned Japanese on the West Coast. The Democrats have a history of acting like communists and like the crazy social democrats that they now say that they are. When you look at the way they behave and the suggestions that come out of their mouths, it has to frighten you as an American.
Yeah.
So, Joe, we've been hearing for weeks now that the Mueller report is incoming at any second. Obviously, that timeline keeps getting pushed back. When can we expect the Mueller report, and what can we expect AG Bill Barr to do with that? How much of it will actually be made public to the American people?
I don't know, but here are the facts. The report will be made to the Attorney General by Mr. Mueller, not the public and not the Congress. That confidential report will then be digested by Barr, and he will decide what, if any, part of it to make public. Here's what he cannot make public or even share with Congress. A, classified information in there. B, grand jury material, which will consist of about 90% of the report. So what he tells Congress will be minimal. I'm sure he will explain it, and I think he'll put out something, but it will not be a fulsome discussion of the entire thing. And if Congress tries to sue to get the report, they will lose because it is a privileged document. It's covered by executive privilege. That is an internal document. Remember, Mueller works for Barr. He works for the Department of Justice. He's not a separate entity like the old independent counsel was. So it's up to Barr and the president to determine what is released.
You know, one of the I constantly, as we think about waiting for this report, think about how James Comey basically attacked Hillary Clinton through prosecuting her in the court of public opinion, but not recommending an actual prosecution, which was a bizarre thing at the time, and he was eventually fired for it, and it did in part by Rod Rosenstein recommending it. Is that the kind of thing that Bill Barr would have been disgusted by, the way James Comey handled the Hillary case?
Oh, I think if Bill Barr had been Attorney General, first of all, that never would have happened because Comey would never have dared to have bucked Barr. Barr never would have gone on the tarmac in Phoenix and met with Bill Clinton. Please. Loretta Lynch compromised herself so horribly. And by the way, we learned something from her testimony that was released. Loretta Lynch, she said she never read any of the FISA warrants and was unaware of what was in the 4 Carter-page FISA warrants. Now, can you imagine any Attorney General not knowing about something that was so important as that? That shows that Sally Yates, John Carlin, the Assistant Attorney General for National Security, James Comey, and the upper echelons of the FBI thought that Loretta Lynch was dumb as a post and couldn't handle this stuff. I mean, that is an embarrassing story if you're the Attorney General. No, Barr, listen, Bill Barr would have fired James Comey in an hour.
Yeah, I certainly hope so. And before we let you go, you've got Nicholas Sandman, enter Sandman. He's doing it again. He is going after CNN this time. He's going to sue them for $250 million over vicious and direct attacks on him. What do you make of his latest round of lawsuits now against CNN?
Well, contrary to some of the blathering by the legal commentators on CNN and MSNBC, I think Mr. Sandman has a great chance of succeeding against the Post and against CNN because he's a private citizen. Not only that, he is a juvenile. And under the law, he is viewed differently. He's not a public figure. He didn't make himself a public figure. He's not an office holder. He has rights that other people don't have under New York Times versus Sullivan, the idiotic Supreme Court ruling that made First Amendment rights part of libel law, which had not been for 200 years. I think he wins. He wins probably by settlement. There will never be a trial because none of these organizations could stand a trial. He will win motions to dismiss by both the Post and CNN, and they will settle. They're going to pay him a lot of money, and Lynn Wood is going to be richer still.
It kind of feels like the CNN case is going to be even easier than the Washington Post, given the fact that it wouldn't take much to just scan 48 hours of CNN coverage after the Covington Catholic story broke and find commentator after commentator paid for by CNN attacking the kid. That's going to be a pretty easy venture.
Here's the other problem for the media now. It's called Twitter. Their reporters and their people make commentary outside the bounds of their normal jobs. Every one of those statements is attributable to their employer. And Twitter is going to kill New York Times versus Sullivan. I predict that New York Times versus Sullivan will be reversed as a result of Twitter. Thank you, Twitter, you monopolistic SOB.
And by the end of this, CNN will be the Covington News Network. All right, thank you very much, Joe diGenova. Appreciate it as always.